There's this idea out by some of the people who hate Muslims that somehow like this is like a pro-Islam thing. Are you insane? Nothing hurts the Muslim community more than this. So the people who are hurt most are obviously the victims, the National Guard who got shot. But I would say after them, and well after them because they're the ones who actually literally got hurt. But after them is Muslim Americans and immigrants and Afghans. Because those are the guys who now everybody's gonna take it out on, right?
So that is a real clip of Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks in his coverage of the Afghan national and Muslim who walked up to two National Guardsmen, shot both of them, killing one of them, making the case that the real victims from this particular attack, of course, after the people who were shot, were actually Muslims in the United States of America. Actually, refugees in this country are the most impacted because, as we all well know from that Norm Macdonald clip that I'm so fond of playing, the real problem with Islamic terror is how it makes people feel about innocent, peaceful Muslims.
I can't say my friend's name, but he said his biggest fear is that ISIS or some terrorist group like that will get a hold of a dirty bomb and explode it over a major city within the United States and kill tens of millions of people. Because then the blowback against innocent Muslims would be absolutely terrible.
Yes, that's right.
That's true.
Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Norm Macdonald gone way too soon. His words are as true, if not more true now than they were when he said them. And again, we have Cenk Uygur unironically, uncomedically making the case that in reality, Muslims are the most impacted and we should all feel bad for the Muslims because guess what? A Muslim guy decided to drive from Washington State all the way to Washington, D.C. in order to kill National Guardsmen who were completely innocent and he should not have targeted for any reason at all whatsoever. So this is what we're going to talk about today. This is what we're going to discuss because the entirety of this segment is Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks trying to obfuscate blame from anything that's relevant in order to make the case that in reality, it's America's fault. And also, he's going to make the argument at certain points that maybe this was a Trump CIA false flag plot because again, you can never ever actually pin Islamic terror on the Islamic terrorists. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
This comes from a video entitled Alleged DC Shooter Was a CIA Child Soldier, ?
You know, usually there's a quick knee-jerk reaction that becomes very political and you have the two sides that fight each other. One side, you know, almost it comes across as if people are trying to carry water for the person who carried out this disgusting act of violence. And I don't want anyone to think that I have any interest in doing that. What happened was an injustice, but what's important is to understand why it happened and how we can prevent it from happening again in the future.
And when you go to this video, you actually have Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks, friend of the channel, literal best friend to me. Obviously, that's true and not a meme at all whatsoever, looking dead into the camera and saying, listen, the goal of this segment is not in any way, shape, or form to obfuscate responsibility from the shooter and his own actions. And while I do appreciate Anna Kasparian telling that to me and all of you guys out there in the audience by looking directly into camera, in reality, the person that she needs to tell that to is Cenk Uygur because his entire intention throughout the course of the segment is to do exactly that, is to blame everyone and anything but the shooter, but Islam, but the fact that he's a refugee who is brought here with poor vetting for his own actions. Again, Anna gives us some interesting facts throughout the course of this particular segment about how this guy was recruited by the CIA at 15, which Anna keeps emphasizing makes him a child soldier.
Was this individual vetted before he was allowed into the United States? We're going to give you the details on that. What was the extent of his cooperation with the CIA as the war in Afghanistan was taking place? Why was he recruited when he was was a kid, 15 years old. So we're going to get to all of that.
And while I understand where Anna is coming from, because in the context of the United States of America, a 15-year-old is 100% a child, you have to understand that this person was recruited in Afghanistan, and the age where you are expected to assume the role of a man in Afghanistan is significantly younger. So calling him a child soldier is a bit disingenuous, because in reality, this 15-year-old would have likely been fighting against Taliban recruits that are age 13. So the idea that this guy was somehow some anomaly in that country doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever. And again, also doesn't line up with the realities on the ground in Afghanistan. One of the things that I was told by a friend who actually worked intelligence as a contractor over in Afghanistan is that the people that he was interviewing are actually incredibly difficult to vet because they don't have birth certificates when they're born. In fact, when you ask these people what their own birthday is, a lot of times they don't even know, because again, the record keeping over there is not exactly as precise as we have in the United States of America. In addition to that, he speculated that this individual might have been lying and saying that he was younger than he was in order to gain certain advantages during the process of being recruited by the CIA, although he said he couldn't be 100% sure about that because his group and his organization never interviewed people that were stated to be under the age of 18. But again, this is not uncommon in Afghani society, and once you realize that it was either he was going to be recruited by the CIA for CIA missions or join the Taliban at a much younger age, it kind of, doesn't really have the same luster, even though Anna says child soldier a lot of times. And by the way, I don't disagree with her analysis that training a young person or any person to kill and giving them honors and prestige for killing and then bringing that person into the United States of America might be a recipe for disaster. So again, while I disagree with her framing because I think it's as harsh as humanly possible, I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that, hey, we trained this person up in order to be a killer in Afghanistan. He's used to that third world culture and basically implementing violence as the solution to all of his problems. Therefore, when you bring him to the United States of America, he might not necessarily be a good fit, which by the way is kind of a disastrous scenario because these people do help us over there in their country. They are subject to being killed by the Taliban, so you can't really abandon them either. So essentially, you're in a crap situation. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But again, this isn't about me debating my literal best friend Anna Kasparian. This is about Cenk Uygur using this as an opportunity to obfuscate blame from Muslims as a whole and kind of make it out to be like Muslims are actually the real victims in this scenario. Check this out.
Yeah, so we've done how many billions of dollars in surveillance? It seems like we never catch the guy. I wonder if the surveillance is to catch terrorists or to catch us and monitor us.
So Cenk starts off his commentary with a throwaway line about how the surveillance apparatus must be to capture us and to monitor us rather than to stop the terrorists, because in this particular case, they didn't stop this guy. But again, I will point out for all of you guys out there in the audience, what this man is alleged to have done is get into his car in Washington State, drive all the way to Washington, D.C., wait around until he saw National Guardsmen, and then fire upon said National Guardsmen. I don't understand what capturing that on surveillance video is supposed to actually do in terms of actually identifying the threat if this guy was not working with any organization or in communication with anybody about this potential attack. It doesn't seem to line up like our surveillance apparatus could actually capture this individual. But again, Cenk is reaching for anything and everything in order to deflect from the fact that this was Islamic terror, which by the way, I will prove to you in the most basic way after Cenk doesn't say anything about this one aspect of the story, coincidentally, but of course runs defense for Muslims.
And then I wonder if this is productive or counterproductive. That's not a tough one. So if this guy really wanted to help the cause of Afghans or Muslims or immigrants, he could not have done anything worse or more counterproductive, which then makes me wonder, what was the true motive? And that's an interesting conversation.
So here Cenk says, well, if this guy was trying to help the cause of Islam, if he was trying to help the cause of Afghan refugees, which by the way, nobody was making the case that he was trying to help the cause specifically of Afghan refugees, he couldn't have picked a more counterproductive method in order to do so, which makes Cenk question the actual motive behind this. Again, this is the dumbest reasoning humanly possible, and essentially you could use this to talk your way out of anybody who's obviously guilty and committed a crime for obvious reasons of actually being guilty. Now, let's say for an example that you want to kill somebody for life insurance money, and you do in fact kill that person for life insurance money, but then you get arrested and you get put on trial and the evidence against you is overwhelming. Now, if I went to Cenk Uygur's school of logic, what I would say if I was an attorney representing this obvious guilty murderer is say, Your Honor, it doesn't make any sense for my client to have killed this person for the insurance money, because when you murder somebody for insurance money, that actually invalidates the life insurance policy, and it just would be the most counterproductive thing my client could have done, murdering this person and then getting caught if he wanted the insurance money. Now, of course, normal people would say, wait a minute, he didn't think he was going to get caught. He wasn't thinking the way a rational person would think when he committed that crime, so that defense is stupid and ridiculous. But Cenk Uygur over at the Young Turks says, oh, well, that makes me question his motive. That makes me really think about alternate theories related to this particular case, because if you think about it, if this guy was motivated by Islam, nothing could have harmed the cause of Islam more than people thinking, wow, Muslims be doing terrorism again. That's not very good. Again, this basically ends up backwards nullifying all Muslim terror all over the world, because every single time you do one of these attacks, presumably they could backfire, which means any bad action, by the way, can also be nullified under the same premise that there could be some backlash to said bad action. Again, ridiculously stupid argumentation from Cenk Uygur, but this is the point. He's just trying to say things in order to deflect from the fact that this guy was likely motivated by Islam in part to commit this attack. And by the way, the reason that we know that is because witnesses said that before he fired on these National Guard troops, he was yelling out Allah Akbar, which again, people will say just means God is good, but typically this is what somebody would yell out when they're committing an Islamic terror attack. So Cenk never mentions that throughout the course of this segment. He always deflects away from it to every single other circumstance, and the reason he doesn't mention that is because this is the most obvious indication of motive that we have so far related to this case, but Cenk's not interested in actually informing you. He's interested in deflecting blame from Muslims who he views as the real victim of this attack.
So, look, first of all, Chris Cuomo came after me today for talking about some other case. I don't even remember which case. He said, well, yeah, how come you're not talking about this guy? Where's the question? Like, so a guy goes and kills one member of the National Guard, terribly injures the other. So the guy's a terrible guy and it's a terrible act. Where's the question?
So Cenk mentions Chris Cuomo getting at him on social media for not talking about other cases where people that we let in as refugees from Afghanistan ended up attacking people in the United States of America or were arrested for plots that they failed to execute in this country. And a couple of examples that again weren't talked about by Cenk Uygur were the Fairfax guy who was pulled over with a weapon, who was on his way to commit a shooting, who told officers during the course of that stop that he wishes he would have joined the Taliban. He hates the United States of America. And again, this is indicative of problems with Afghani refugees coming into the United States of America. Now, of course, there's also another plot where the FBI ended up making an arrest before it was executed of an Afghan national who also, for similar reasons, wanted to do an act of terror in the United States of America. Now, of course, there's a fourth incident that has also been brought to the attention of the American people post this particular case. And again, when you start to look and examine the motivations behind these particular attacks, they start to become clear. Like, these people are not integrating well into the United States of America. I'm sure there's a multitude of factors that are behind that, but by the way, part of those factors is that they have a culture that is incompatible with the United States of America. And by the way, interestingly enough, that appears to be more common among Afghani refugees in the United States of America than it is among Iraqi refugees, who actually seem to be integrating rather well in this country by comparison. So yeah, it is down to the culture, in my opinion, of that nation, and Cenk is just trying to dance around that. But again, this is nothing new for Cenk Uygur. If you guys will remember, 10 years ago, in fact, almost to the date of the publication of this video, Cenk Uygur did a segment on the San Bernardino shooting, and he did 2 segments actually, and one was done prior to the knowledge that this guy was an Islamic terrorist. And throughout the course of that segment, Cenk thought this guy was a white person, so he used the term terrorist over and over and over again.
We have met the terrorist, it is us. So this is what I'm terrorized by. We've got all these nonsense debates about Syrian refugees here. What Syrian refugees do we have in the country? What terrorist attacks have they done here? None, right? You want to talk about probability and statistics and who's likely to cause you harm? It's us. It's the mass shootings, day in, day out. When is it going to be in your neighborhood? I guarantee it's coming, okay? You want to be scared of something? Be scared of something rational. The mass shooters. They're everywhere. They're in Oregon, they're in California, they're in New Jersey, they're in Texas. They're everywhere. They're in Colorado, they're everywhere. We are the terrorists. We're terrorizing ourselves. How many times are we going to allow this? It happens every week.
Now you can hear the anger and belligerence in his voice, and if you watch that segment in its entirety, you can see that Cenk clearly believes that it's a right-winger that is behind this, and Cenk is not interested at all whatsoever in the motivation, in mitigating factors, or anything of the sort. He's just talking about how, oh my god, it's so terrible we go after Muslims when you have all these everyday mass shooter terrorists across the country that are a big problem, and again, he's really angry about it. Now, if you guys remember this story, if you guys remember this tale, the San Bernardino shooter happened to be motivated by radical Islam. And in fact, the Young Turks did a follow-up segment to that previous segment where Cenk was screaming like a madman. However, it was a little bit different, not just in Cenk's tone, but also in the titling of the segment. So the first video was titled Breaking. You have the San Bernardino shooting, and Cenk Uygur screams about terrorism all throughout the course of that particular segment. But the very next day, published December 3rd, again, almost 10 years to the date that Cenk Uygur did this segment, deflecting blame away from this Islamic terrorist. The video was titled like this: How Societal Demonization of Muslims Helps ISIS. And Cenk's tone throughout that segment wasn't screaming, wasn't raving like a madman. It was calm and, again, very much about deflecting blame away from Islam when the topic was Islamic terror.
A lot of people are wondering who did the shootings in San Bernardino. Now, it's a very, very fair question because as we were doing the show live yesterday, we didn't know yet, and we had no names, we had no motive, and it looked like a workplace shooting. Now, oftentimes when radical Muslims do shootings or bombings, they do it in a very prominent place: Paris, New York, Washington. San Bernardino, at a place where they have disabled kids. Seems so random. And there was an initial report out about how there was a fight at a holiday party and then somebody left and then came back with weaponry. Okay, so that's why people were unsure yesterday. Today, we're a little bit more sure. Not a little bit, a lot more sure. So here are your new clues as to why they might have done this. First of all, we have the 2 suspects. Yesterday, we thought it was 3, but one person who had run from the building, probably understandably so, was detained and then released. They did not have anything to do with this. There were only 2 suspects, and they're a couple, Saeed Rizwan Farouk and Tashfeen Malik. So they're Muslim. Does that give you a clue? Of course it does, right? So their headline is, it was Muslims. It was Muslim killers. That answers the question. So that's my defense of their headline. Now, what is the problem with their headline? It leaves you with the impression that it is Muslims in general. Okay, so I want to take this moment to be a little bit clearer about who we should be mad at, right? Now, it's not just so that we can vent and be full of rage, but it's so that we can get to a more constructive solution so that we have less of these shootings and bombings, etc. So the 3 categories I have are radical Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims, and then Muslims in general.
Fast forward a full decade later, and Cenk is doing the same exact thing, the same exact commentary about how, guess what, the real victims of Islamic terror are, in fact, the Muslims.
Like, there's this idea out by some of the people who hate Muslims that somehow, like, this is like a pro-Islam thing. Are you insane? Nothing hurts the Muslim community more than this. So the people who are hurt most are obviously the victims, the National Guard who got shot. But I would say after them, and well after them, because they're the ones who actually literally got hurt, But after them is Muslim Americans and immigrants and Afghans, because those are the guys who now everybody's going to take it out on. And
right.
so, and look, the guy worked with the CIA, so it does make me wonder. I mean, this deeply, deeply counterproductive thing to the Muslim American community happens when, boy, some forces really, really wanted it. Like, God, it's so well timed to be able to say the Muslims, the immigrants, all these things, right? And so now we have it. Congratulations, CIA. I don't know what happened there.
So then Cenk, of course, pitches the inside job theory that, oh, this was actually done by the CIA, by the United States of America, in order to justify the evil, bad orange man's crackdown on illegal immigrants, on refugees, on legal immigrants, on immigrants from the third world, from the Islamic world. And again, I just want to point out that Cenk Uygur is going full Alex Jones right now, specifically for the sole purpose of defending Muslims. After a Muslim who shouted Allah Akbar during the course of this attack killed a National Guardsman and wounded another one, Cenk's first instinct is to think about how to defend the Muslims, how to protect them, because obviously he is overemphasizing the Islamic portion of his identity, which is hilarious because he's trying to call everybody out for doing this with the shooter who did it himself when he shouted, allegedly, Allah Akbar as he committed this shooting, as he did this attack. And again, the other factors are interesting. I'm not saying don't do this segment, don't talk about this, but again, Cenk would never embrace conspiracy theories in order to deflect blame from any kind of white person or right-wing group, because this is obviously a blind spot that he has. The man instinctually deflects away from Islam as a topic that you can criticize, and it's embarrassing and it's humiliating and it's ridiculous. So yeah, this is the state of Cenk Uygur right now. A lot of people have given Anna, including myself, credit for changing up her ways, for actually realizing where she was wrong here and there. And people have basically given Cenk tag-along credit. But the fact is, he's still doing the same stuff that he did a decade ago. And by the way, I could probably go back further and find other videos of him doing the exact same thing when the topic of Islamic terror comes up.
So everybody has a bunch of different parts of their identity, right? And people use those different parts whenever they want to make a political point. So this guy was, for example, male. He was Afghan. He was young. He was Muslim. He was an immigrant. And he was CIA trained. Okay, so what has our politicians and our media decided to focus on? Not the young male part, which is what is the connective tissue to almost every single mass shooter.
So we have now broadened this out all the way from Muslim Afghan that yelled Allah Akbar at the time that he committed this attack to young male being the connective tissue. And all I have to say to you, Cenk, if you're actually going to make this argument as if it's intelligent, is why not pull back a little bit further? Because you know what all of these people have in common, both the male and the female mass shooters? They happen to be apes with opposable thumbs. So you know what? Maybe we should really highlight that as the connective tissue, because when I was in Ireland, I actually went to a zoo and I saw some gibbons and they were making sounds very similar to how this guy made sounds, when he said Allah Akbar, but we're not going to focus on that. We're broadening it out to sounds. And I just want to say that maybe, just maybe, the connective tissue is opposable thumbs, apes, and making sounds. Let's roll some of that footage so you guys can see what I'm talking about. See what I mean? Don't you all feel stupid? Don't you all feel like a bunch of dumb idiots? Because this whole time you thought the issue was attitudes and cultural differences between people from Afghanistan that happen to be of Islamic faith that yell out Allah Akbar at the time that they're committing the crime. But the real connective tissue between all of this is the ability to make sounds, being an ape, and of course having opposable thumbs, opposable fingers. That seems to be the main objective fact that connects all of this. And this is just the logic that has been revealed to me by Cenk Uygur over at the Young Turks Turks, who totally 100% isn't more interested in covering up what's actually going down in this particular country, in this particular incident, and just broadening it out so much that he's actually talking about nothing in particular. That's definitely not what's happening, guys. The Gibbons are just as likely as the Afghan refugees yelling Allah Akbar to commit attacks in the United States of America. Trust me, I know. Cenk Uygur taught me. Just broaden it out whenever you're in trouble.
But I do, like most likely answer is he was disgruntled with how life was going, okay? But either way, hold on, Anna, one last thing. Either way, whether they plucked him as a child soldier and poisoned his mind, and then all he knows is how to kill, and then we bring him here and then he kills people, or the CIA put him up to, which is less likely. Either way, it's definitely the CIA's fault.
Now again, Cenk's saying either way, whether the CIA plucked him as a child soldier, poisoned his mind, trained him to kill, and then he just did as he was trained, or, they kind of had him do this in order to do the crackdown. Either way, we understand that it's definitely 100% has nothing to do with Islam, despite the fact that he yelled allegedly Allah Akbar as he committed this attack. Now, I will also point out that Anna Kasparian actually cuts into something that's a little bit more interesting toward the end of this video, where she talks about how he was refusing to work at certain positions because, again, he felt like they were beneath him. Again, this guy came to the United States as a refugee, but he wouldn't work unless the job was prestigious enough, which sounds like an issue with culture and entitlement, but that's not really addressed. That's not really talked about. What we need to address, what we need to discuss is, of course, the Islamophobia and how Muslims are the real victim of this guy shooting at 2 U.S. service personnel, killing one of those people. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of Cenk actually doing the Norm Macdonald thing and then throwing out a bunch of conspiracies about how I guess the Trump administration is behind this in order to crack down on the Afghans? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Cenk defending Islam at all costs. Till next time.